My name is Shawn Shafner and I am a teaching artist. And this is Literacy Through Art with Arts for All. In this unit, we're going to be diving into poetry. This is video 1, our introduction to the topic. Video 1, poetry.
Artists express their feelings.
It's good to be with you today. At Arts for All, we're all artists. Artists are people who express their feelings and ideas. So, artist, how are you feeling today? It can be helpful to check in with our heart to notice how we're feeling. Heart was one of our actors' tools from the last video series. If you like, you can put your hand on your heart, close your eyes, enjoy a breath, and notice how your heart might be feeling.
In, out.
Good. Did you find a word for your feeling? Now let's get the rest of our actors' tools involved. What are our 4 actors' tools again? Oh yeah! Body, voice, imagination, and heart. We just use our hearts, so now let's imagine. How might our bodies and our voices express how we feel? I'm feeling peaceful, so I'm going to express it with a sound and movement like this. How might you show how you're feeling? Great. Shake it out and come back to your actor's neutral.
Poets, poetry, and poems.
Actors free their hearts and use their voices and bodies to imagine stories, characters, and whole worlds. Actors often say words, but they don't normally write the words that they say. Writers, on the other hand, free their hearts and then use their words to imagine stories, characters, and a whole world. In this series, we're going to learn about a special kind of writer called a poet. Have you ever heard that word, poet? What might a poet do? Anyone could be a poet. I could be a poet. And so could you. This is Eloise Greenfield. She's a poet. 1 poet. Here's 2 poets. These people were poets. These poets are alive and working right now. Anyone can be a poet, including you. So what does a poet do? Poets write poetry. Now you might be asking, what is poetry? Well, thank goodness for that. We have a place where we can look up words to find out their meanings, their definitions. We can look them up in the, the dictionary. Let's take a look. Interesting. It says here, writing that usually involves figurative language and lines that have rhythm and sometimes rhyme, or the writings of a poet. Well, I think we knew that already. Now the word figurative comes from the word figure. It means imaginative, or with words that compare something to something else, like comparing a person to a summer's day. Poetry is a kind of writing or literature. You'll find it, well, where might you find things to read? You can find poetry or other writing or literature in books, in magazines, at a library, or a bookstore, on the internet, on a tablet, even on the subway. Lots of places. Poetry is sort of like breakfast cereal. Okay, hear me out. Poetry is a kind of writing, and breakfast cereal is a kind of food. If I said, get me some breakfast cereal, well, you know where to go in the grocery store. But once you get there, there are still a bunch of different kinds. Some have fruits, some have oats, some have marshmallows, some are in boxes, some are in bags, some are good hot, and some are best cold. Poetry is not a kind of food, and you won't find it in a box at the bodega or the corner store. But if we did eat poetry And you could buy it at the grocery store. You wouldn't eat all of poetry at one time, just like you can't eat all of breakfast cereal. You have one bowl at a time. One bowl or one serving of poetry is one poem, or maybe a few poems, depending on how hungry you are. A poem can be very short. Poetry called haiku comes from Japan, and they are just 3 lines long. This haiku was written over 400 years ago by a man named Matsuo Basho and includes a drawing. It translates to say, "Quietly, quietly, yellow mountain roses fall, sound of the rapids." Nice, right? A poem can also be very long. Epic poetry is as long as a book. This is one page from an epic Greek poem called the Iliad, written about 1500 years ago. It's about a soldier named Odysseus, fighting in a long war with lots of adventure and tragedy and romance and magical gods. Pretty cool, right? Most poems are on the shorter side, and there are many, many varieties of poetry. Blank verse poetry has rhythm in their words. It is called meter. You can do it too. Rhyming poetry, rhyme in time. Free verse poetry is just that, free. It doesn't have to follow a recipe of meter or rhyme and can change from line to line. Lyric poetry is all about feelings, while pastoral poetry is all about nature. There's poetry about love called sonnets. Elegies are poetry about death. Odes are a form of poetry to celebrate something or someone. And limericks are short rhyming poetry, often used to tease somebody or make jokes. The bottom line is, poetry takes many shapes. A poem can be about anything a poet wants to write about. Let's read some poetry together now.
Let's read a poem.
Maybe one by this poet. This is April Wayland. She is kind of silly, and she writes poetry for kids. Here's one poem for us to read together. Pause the video now to read it by yourself, or close your eyes and listen to me read it to you. Or if you like, we can read it along together. All right, let's go. Exercising My Voice by April Halpern Wayland. I can yawn, hum, wiggle my tongue, blow through a straw. I can drop my jaw. I can trill my lips like a motor in a lake. I can sing ee-oo. I can hiss like a snake. I'm getting ready in the thick of this chatter to tell the world that my voice matters. Cool poem, right? Let's look at how this poem is structured. This poem has 3 sections called stanzas. The lines are short and don't always end with punctuation like commas and periods, as you would a normal sentence. Poetry is meant to be read. The line breaks tell the reader where to pause. Let's read it again, this time together. Exercising My Voice by April Halpern Wayland. I can yawn, hum, wiggle my tongue, blow through a straw. I can drop my jaw. I can trill my lips like a motor in a lake. I can sing ee-oo. I can hiss like a snake. I'm getting ready in the thick of this chatter to tell the world that my voice matters. Great job!
Try this at home.
Today we learned all about poets, poetry, and read a poem together. I know, those words are all similar, and it can be hard to remember which one is which. I helped myself remember with the poet's call. It goes like this. A poet like me writes poetry. Look, I wrote a poem. I like to use my actor's tools to show it. When I say, a poet like me, I point to myself. And when I say, writes poetry, I'm writing a poem. And then I tear the poem off and show it and say, look, I wrote a poem. Let's do it together. Ready? Poet's call. A poet like me writes poetry. Look, I wrote a poem. All right, great job. You are a poet, and you can write poetry. Maybe you could write a poem now. Remember, a poem can be about whatever you want. A feeling, someone, or something you love, a funny thing that happened, anything you want. Like the poem we read together says, your voice matters. So write a poem and read it to yourself or to a friend.
Time to say goodbye.
Thanks so much for joining me. An audience claps for an actor, but we like to snap for a poet. So let's give ourselves some snap. We can just pretend if you can't snap.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Wishing you a great day and see you soon from all of us at Arts for All.
See you later. It was really fun. Thanks for coming. I really enjoyed that. Thanks.